All right, friends, we should be live.
Woohoo! Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Steve.
Welcome back for another Field Trip Friday. This week, we are visiting a wonderful bakery in downtown Durham called Loaf Bakery, and we are here with the founder and owner, Ron. Hi, Ron.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And this week we are hosted by two classes today in Durham Public Schools. We are hosted by Miss Kennedy's third grade class at Southwest Elementary, and we are hosted by Miss Hardin's and Miss McPhail's upper elementary class at Moorhead Montessori. So welcome to everyone. Let me share those school photos. We have Moorhead Elementary, or Southwest Elementary, excuse me. Welcome everyone from Southwest, and welcome to everyone from Moorhead, which I am just so happy that you all are joining us today. That one?
No, this is Southwest.
Okay, why do I keep sharing only Southwest?
There you go. This is looking good.
Silly.
Yeah. Wait.
There we go. Finally, we get to see where Moorhead is. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for your patience, Moorhead.
Yes, thank you so much. So shall we already just start the video? I think that was a pretty good introduction.
Yeah, what I'd like to remind those of you who are attending in the Zoom space, so Moorhead and Southwest, please feel free to send us, to chat us questions. Feel free, it seems like I can already see many of you are able to type, but if you're not able to type, just feel free to ask somebody who can type for you your questions. We'll have time at the end of the video to answer some of your questions, but in the meantime, you'll see me over here typing away, kind of helping to answer during the video, but we'll also have some of your questions answered so that everybody else can hear them, everybody who's not on Zoom with us today. Stay curious while we're watching and let us know what questions you have.
All right, I am going to start the video now where we visit Loaf Bakery.
I can't wait.
And I'm Steve.
Welcome to another Field Trip Friday.
We're here at Loaf. This is a bakery. We're downtown Durham. We're super excited to be here. Y'all want to see what's inside?
I know I sure do.
I do too.
Let's go. Hey, Ron.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
It's good to see you again, Jenna.
Great. So can you tell me where we are?
Well, you're in Loaf. And Loaf is a little retail and some wholesale, but a retail bake shop. We sell breads and pastries that we make in-house. To all of our friends and family in the community.
Cool. Let's take a look around.
Yeah, let's take a look around.
Please go.
I would love to know a moment of curiosity for you in your life.
A moment of curiosity.
Yes.
Well, it's been more of a lifetime of curiosity. I don't think curiosity comes in just moments. Do you?
I know.
I mean, or you just keep having moments. But,
Yeah.
I can't remember one moment that really got me interested in science in particular, but I remember the time frame that cemented it for me. It was when I was on camping trips in high school. I went on camping trips and canoeing trips and things with my school all the way through. It was a really wonderful experience, but particularly in many cases, the biology teacher would be leading, or one of the leaders of the group. And we would be out either on a hillside or in a forest or on a lake. And this teacher always knew like some of the species of birds and trees and things that were around, and he knew the geology of stuff, and I found it captivating, and I gained this real both appreciation for what was around, but appreciation that I didn't know much about what I was inside of the natural world around me. So at that time it really coalesced, and it made me want to learn more about that. And so then I went on to study biology, and I just kept learning. And so it just that time of just seeing the natural world and being captivated by the natural world made me want to learn about it.
That's really
and
cool.
so I've been doing that ever since, even in the bakery.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
What kind of experiment are we doing today?
Well, today we're going to do an experiment with a slightly different kind of cookie dough that I made today. Normally in our cookies we have all the usual ingredients. We've got butter and sugar and flour, and most importantly we have some baking soda for leavening. So to show you the effects of leavening, I made the very same cookie dough, but I didn't put any baking soda in it. So the only difference between our normal cookie dough that we usually bake every day and this one is that I just didn't put in the baking soda.
So you used a word that I'm not sure if I know what that means. What does leavening mean?
Oh, leavening just means lifting something up. So that could be a sourdough that you might have been making during the pandemic. Everyone's doing it. That's what's called a natural leavening. Chemical leavening is when you take baking soda or baking powder, which is only slightly different from baking soda, and through a chemical reaction that creates a gas that then does the leavening. In both cases you need a gas. One is just produced by the yeast in the sourdough culture, or in this case, by the chemical reaction going on inside the dough.
That's really interesting.
That's awesome.
So what happens usually when some ingredients in a recipe, be it cookies or bread, when they don't make it inside of the dough, and then what happens after you mix it or bake it?
Well, if you forget an ingredient, which everyone does from time to time, hopefully as you get better at it, you just have those accidents less and less.
Right.
But if you forget to add an ingredient, then everything will change. The baking process and so many processes in life rely on every aspect, every ingredient interacting with the other ingredient to make the finished product. So it's really hard to tell what will happen if you leave an ingredient out. But I know, for example, if we didn't add any flour at all, we would just have a puddle. There'd be nothing to hold it together, just like in a cake or a loaf of bread. It's the flour that holds things together. If we didn't add the eggs, well, in this case, the eggs are the only source of liquid in there, so it would just be this greasy mass. And if we didn't have any butter, it'd be a tough, chunky, hard cake. But I couldn't predict exactly how everything would work, and that's the nature of an experiment. We don't know what's going to happen. So,
See, what do you think is going to happen to our cookies that don't have baking soda?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm really curious to find out. I think that because Ron, being an experienced baker, has discussed this idea of kind of the leavening and the lifting, I expect we're going to see something that's less lifted, but I don't really know like what that means, essentially. Like Ron said, like sometimes you have interactions that might not be what you expect. So I definitely expect that we won't get that kind of like puffiness of like your typical cookie, but I don't know. I'm really curious.
I think, if there's no gas to lift it up, it might just spread out.
yeah.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
Okay, let's go ahead. So here's the dough I made this morning.
Do you think it would taste the same without baking soda?
Not entirely. Baking soda actually has a slight flavor from the sodium and the carbonate in it. But I'm just going to scoop a couple of balls of cookie dough.
It certainly looks delicious.
I'm sure if you want to try it and taste it, you can go ahead. It's regular cookie dough. So I'm only going to put 2 on this pan because our normal cookies are about this big anyway, and it would fit too. And we'll see what will happen when we bake these. We've got a little toaster oven here.
That's good cookie dough.
Do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Get a little piece.
I'm going to put these in there. And we'll get that going at approximately the same temperature that we bake the cookies in the ovens downstairs that you saw before.
That's cool. So Ron, while we're waiting for these cookies to bake, I thought we could talk a little bit about chemical reactions.
Okay.
So Steve, do you know how we can tell if a chemical reaction has happened?
So typically we look for changes, and literally look for changes. A lot of times you can see things change. You can see, like something bubble. You can see something
Color change.
Yeah, you can see the color of something change.
Yeah.
You can see something precipitate, which means to kind of like form a solid. Like if you have a liquid and you see stuff like start forming, like little flakes and stuff start forming, that's a precipitate. Something is precipitating out of your solution.
So we got a gas forming, a solid forming, and a liquid. Color change.
Sometimes you might see something, for example, like fire is a chemical reaction.
Yeah, fire is a chemical reaction.
You might see something emit light, is I guess where I was going with that, is it can get really bright.
Yes.
Or a sound.
Yeah,
Or a sound.
Emitting an energy of some kind.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And cooking is our chemical reactions too.
Right, well, I think we have all of it. Hopefully we don't have the fire today. But we have all the rest going on in a cookie or a cake or a loaf of bread. You've got a volume change, you've got a smell being emitted, you've got color happening. Most of those things are visible. Some aren't, but most chemical reactions have some of them, right?
So what do we have something set up right here?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I was hoping we could show folks is the way that the leavening agent that we're using, as Ron mentioned earlier, we're using baking soda to mix that with an acid. In this case, that acid is vinegar. And some of you have probably done this experiment.
Yes.
It's pretty classic, where you take the vinegar and the baking soda, and you're going to see that chemical reaction. But what I wanted to show is a little bit of the kind of change in matter. So the way that this produces a gas, but that gas was originally part of what we had. So we're going to weigh this the whole time and see whether it changes its mass.
So let's see what happens when we dump the balloon of baking soda into this vinegar.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Oh, here it goes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Look
yeah.
at that.
And it's still 62 grams.
Yes. So we're getting this massive change, or massive. No pun intended there. We're getting this really big change in the matter, like in what's there. Like we now have this big balloon bubble on the side.
Yes.
But all of our mass is still the same. We're very, very, very close.
Yes. Which I think is so cool. That carbon dioxide, that gas that was made from our chemical reaction, was within those components that we put in there. So that carbon and oxygen was within the baking soda and vinegar, and we just kind of separated it out.
Exactly.
Where they were.
Exactly right.
We rearranged those particular atoms.
Exactly. So let's take a look at these cookies.
Okay, well, it looks like I was wrong.
Same.
Interesting, yeah.
And Steve, I guess you were wrong
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
We both thought that we would get more spreading and less lifting, but it looks from our experiment like we actually got a little bit less spreading. So clearly, in this, in the cookies I normally bake, the baking soda that's in there bubbles up and actually helps the cookie spread a little bit more, and so it gets a little thinner and crisper the way that our customers like them, the way I like them. So that's kind of a happy accident.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead? Who doesn't like a warm cookie?
Oh, it's very warm. Almost too warm to hold.
Well,
One
it
might
just
say.
come up.
Yes. I was going to break it open to see if it looked different
Uh-huh.
on the inside.
Well, if we take them off with the pan,
Yeah.
Might
they
also
might
help.
cool off a little
Yeah.
bit.
it will pull off on the
But I think this is a really great transition into asking one of our questions that we like to ask our guests, Ron. Is how did you embrace failure one time in your life?
Well, surprisingly, making these cookies was one of the, at Loaf anyway, was one of our first failures that we had to embrace, or at least what I perceived as a failure, and I later learned that I was wrong. I got this recipe from someone that I worked with in catering, and I asked him if I could use this recipe when I opened my bakery, and he said yes. So I took a photograph of it. It was handwritten on a wall. It was old and dusty, and it was a very well-loved recipe, like some of the recipes in your cookbooks at home with thumbprints and things. So I took a photograph and I brought it here to the bakery, and I tried making these cookies again. And the cookies that he was making were the kind you get out of a bag or something. They were a little better than that, of course, but they were uniformly round and they were nice and tall and high, and they looked like, just a cookie that we all, would recognize. And I made them, and I got what you see behind you. They were spread out and they were uneven in shape and they were really thin, but I later realized that instead of having something terrible happen, I basically made a new cookie, and I loved how these cookies came out. So they were thinner and crisper, and the outsides got more caramel flavor because of the chemical change as they were baking. And so it turned out that instead of looking at it as a failure to replicate somebody else's cookie, I had made something new and wonderful, and this became our famous now loaf pecan chocolate chip cookie. And so it's a very new way to look at it. And I had to realize that instead of doing something wrong, I had simply done something different, and it wasn't wrong at all. It was just new.
Yeah,
I like that.
that's so awesome.
I like to call those things happy accidents.
Yep.
All right, let's see if it.
Well, Steve, you should probably open that bag and see what they look like. It's like
Yeah, I was about to say, it would be awesome to compare the cookies.
Compare the cookies. Already, it looks delicious. I'm definitely going to eat this anyway.
So here's, as Ron said, these spread really quite nicely. Let's see the inside here.
Now
I
it's
can
gonna be
do
really
side by
crispy.
This
side.
one's super.
Oh yeah, mine didn't even make a noise when I broke it. It's so thin. Yeah, it's definitely a thinner cookie.
Yeah. Well, sometimes big changes don't look really obvious.
Let's see how this one tastes.
I'm gonna see how this one tastes.
It tastes good.
It tastes good. And I think that's the scientific term.
Yeah, real good.
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us, Ron. Really appreciate
Well, it
it.
was really fun to have you here, and I hope things work well for the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks, Ron.
Thanks,
This was
Ron.
Awesome.
Okay.
See you.
Enjoy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was a fun time.
That was awesome.
And thank you all for being so great and wonderful in the chat. We have so many questions to get to. Ms. McPhail or Ms. Harden or Ms. Kennedy, would you like to read some of the questions that your students had?
Sure. One of them asked, what is one of the most popular things that you bake?
Oh, Ron, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Old man on Zoom. One of the most popular things I think we make is our chocolate croissant, or more properly called pain au chocolat. I think our hosts had some when they came here.
Yep, that day I took some with me, and oh, it was so wonderful. Yeah, definitely one of my favorites of yours.
Ms. Harden or Ms. McPhail, would you like to read? Oh, thank you.
One of my students wanted to know if you created your own sourdough starter.
Yes and no. I made that one myself at home. Oh gosh, 20, 30 years ago. And I've just been keeping it alive ever since. And sourdough starters are kind of funny because they can look dead and you can sort of restart them again. And there's a whole lot of chemistry and biology going on in there. But the simple way to think of it is that you can revive it, or you can reconstitute it pretty much the same as it was, even if it looks like it was dead.
That's
Wow,
awesome.
that is so cool.
Life will find a way.
Life will find a way. I know I had a question that is kind of one of the questions from the chat is how do you make, or do you make Stollen? How do you make it? But I want to know, what is Stollen? One of our attendees was asking about that.
Stollen is a celebration bread for the holidays. A lot of breads in Europe, and this one comes from Dresden in Germany. But it's usually around the end of the year, countries have a sort of a celebratory bread for, in this case, the Christmas holidays or whatever the origin story type holiday is where in the country that you're in. And typically bakers and other food makers will kind of pull out all the stops. They'll add all the good stuff you've been denying yourself the whole year. So Stollen in particular is a yeast bread. It's slightly sweet and it's very enriched with a lot of butter and a lot of eggs. And there's some, usually a lot of cinnamon, maybe a bit of nutmeg, but it's also got a lot of candied fruit peel, candied fruit, which is better than.
Oh no.
See in fruitcakes, unfortunately around here, but so it's a fruit-studded bread that's often rolled around a really nice big log of marzipan. So when you cut through it, you get this wonderful bread and the wonderful fruit inside it, and then this awesome almondy marzipan in the center. So that's from Germany. There's a similar bread called panettone from Italy, which is also wonderful. But yeah, it's very fun, and it's typically only around the holidays. And it also is a cool bread because it lasts for so long. So you can have the same loaf for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's still terrific.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is so great. Any more questions from our chat or from our lovely teachers and our students?
Yeah, I had a student who knew that a lot of times when you're baking, you have to keep some ingredients really cold, but then you put it in a hot oven. And he was wondering why that is, why there's hot and cold both needing to happen.
Well, sometimes it's for timing, because if you have butter, you want to keep it cold until the very end when it does its thing. So butter is often used in pastries to create layers. So when you fold doughs over, you'll get a tiny little layer of butter in between two layers of dough, and on and on and on. And so if that melted before it hit the oven, then it would just be this gooey mess. But if it happens in the oven, then while the dough is setting and becoming bread, the butter is in there puffing things up and making a wonderful series of layers that you see in croissants and puff pastry and stuff. So it's more of a timing thing than anything else. You just don't want it to melt until it's in the oven.
That was awesome. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you for explaining that. I think we have time for at least 2 more questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Harden.
So many popping up.
Another student wanted to know how you settled on the name Loaf for your bakery.
Well, we had to choose it really, really fast for a bunch of reasons many years ago. And it was just kind of fun in Durham. All the little restaurants and things that were starting had little one-word names. And so, we thought, well, at the time, all I was making was bread and loaves of bread. So we thought, well, let's call it Loaf. It was actually my wife's idea, and I thought, great. And I just, from then on, it happened like a snap like that.
Oh, that's cool.
That's wonderful.
Let's see.
One of the students asked, what would happen if you put yeast into a cookie dough?
Yeast into a cookie dough? Actually, not very much, because yeast has to take some time. It's a living thing. So it takes a little bit of time for yeast to eat some of the sugar that's around it and create carbon dioxide, which would be the leavening, the puffy thing. The same end product that you use that we saw in the video, actually, that was carbon dioxide that was making the balloon rise. But yeast makes that too, and that's how that works. But in a cookie, the yeast wouldn't be very happy because it would mostly be cold and very dense and not enough liquid for it to really be doing its thing. And then you would put it in the oven where it wouldn't have enough time to make any carbon dioxide before it, unfortunately, died in the in the oven, becoming a cookie. So it wouldn't really. There are some odd cookies that will have a yeast that you just use the yeast to ferment something and give flavor properties to the final cookie, but it wouldn't be a leavened cookie really.
And so that's why we use the baking soda typically in
Yes.
cookies, right? Right, to get that chemical leavening.
Right.
Baking powder is really just baking soda with a couple other components in it. to create some acid.
Cool.
Not too different, but it's very important. If it says baking soda, to use baking soda, and it says baking powder, to use baking powder. And we have all made that mistake.
Yes, I know I certainly have. Well, looks like we're almost out of time, my friends. So I just want to thank everyone for asking so many wonderful questions of Ron and our baking process. And I want to thank you, Ron, so much for hosting us at Loaf and also joining us today and talking to the students of DPS. And especially thank you to our students from Moorhead Elementary and Southwest Elementary. Thank you to Miss Kennedy's class, Miss Harden, and Miss McPhail's classes. Thank you so much to Willow Alston Socha and Dr. Linda Tergarian, our Durham Public Schools science specialist. And I also want to thank all of the folks at Loaf who allowed us to be in their way last week and just capture the process of them making bread. I especially want to thank you, Steve, too, for being a wonderful host with me.
Likewise, Jenna. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will want to say thank again everyone for joining us this morning, and stay ready because next week we will be visiting Prodigal Farm. We will be learning about cheese making and how cheese goes from really goat from pasture all the way to a finished cheese product. So stay ready for that.
It's going to be super fun. So during the week, maybe you can think a little bit about how that process happens. Where does cheese even come from? Where does milk come from? Do you know?
And maybe even drink some milk or eat some cheese. That's a great way to prepare too.
Absolutely.
All right, my friends. See you next week. Take